did you receive some feedbacks of how it went for them?
Oh, they loved it. No, they loved it. They're very grateful. They can't wait.
Yes.
They're literally counting seconds for Saturday and Sunday. And and they're absolutely, how can I say it? Absolutely empowered by the fact that there is someone like you who can take their work into another level and have it, have a supervision on the work. Because again, our Minister of Health had just sent an official article saying that at this moment, already 15 million of Ukrainians need psychological support, and 4 million of them, need medical treatment already.
Wow.
And these are just reports, they're official reports, because these people who were evaluated, they went through evaluation, they went registered, they got registered, so it's official data.
It's official, yes.
But official comes,
So this corresponds to what I was saying this morning. I was saying that you have a whole nation traumatized. So you have the data. Okay, that's very good. Okay, that's very good. So if I, I had the feeling when I discussed this morning for you that what I prepared is at a very high conceptual level, maybe too high for the people. I'm not sure, but it's possible that, but I can go down and become very practical all the time.
Oh, of course, but remember, Jules, the way you designed a workshop speaks for every single human being in Ukraine.
Yes.
Regardless to the background, regardless to their, educational history. So that's our main goal. Whenever it comes to these guys who you met today, yes, they are in practice already, but that's a different approach. But we need to take into consideration that 15 millions who already are really in need of help. They need access to this information, such as, even the writing in this online workshop the theoretical one that will record.
We will take about 1 hour, maybe a little bit more, to present theory on psychotrauma. It's a very conceptual content, but this conceptual content is necessary to understand what we talk to make distinctions. So the first concept is the traumatic event itself. When we talk of psychotrauma, we have to understand that there is something that happened, and then we have a reaction, and then after that first reaction, we have other reactions. So we have to put things in a sequence, and the first thing in that sequence is what we call a traumatic event. And the psychotrauma itself is caused by a disturbing event. So we have to make the distinction between the event and the psychotrauma itself. So this event must be to provoke psychotrauma. This event must be intense. It must be intense, sudden, unforeseen, and cause a deep fear that might be paralyzing. So sometimes Some people will go through something very difficult, but they will not be paralyzed by this. They be, for them, it's normal. For example, a police officer who works day after day with criminality, it's used to that. But a civil who would do one day the same work will be overwhelmed. You see? So you have the experience, the subjectivity, and all this. So this disturbing event may constitute a threat to the security, to the integrity at a physical or psychological level to a person. It may generate physical wants. You may be hurt physically, and your life can be in danger. And the traumatic quality of the event depends of objective conditions. So you have the outside reality, but you have another side of it, which is the subjective perception. So the way you perceive this reality. So we have an event which is disturbing. This is in the reality, and then you have yourself, your own perception of that reality. So it begins to be complex when you distinguish all these parameters, all these variables. So I will often refer to objectivity, subjectivity, because our perceptions are always subjective, and they depend of our experiences, of our emotions, and many other things. So you and me will not perceive the same house or the same car or the same people the same way. Sometimes it's funny that we ask two people to describe an event, a very simple event, and you will have two different stories for the same thing that just happened a few minutes ago. So this is subjectivity. We have to work with that all the time, all the time. And for a therapist, we can say that it is not the external reality that is the most important, but it is the subjective internal lecture of that reality which is most important, because this one will trigger thinking, ideas, perceptions, emotions, and then behaviors. It's this subjective representation of the reality that makes, that is responsible for the differences in our response to the reality. Is that okay with you?
No, it's crystal clear. And if I may,
Are you? Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you. I'll get to questions afterwards because we go into
Sure.
theory, yeah, and then yeah, I'm writing
Sure.
them down.
No problem. You take notes. That's perfect. Okay, page 2.
We
This event must be, when we talk of a traumatic event, it must be major and it must be massive. So you have sometimes, and we discussed that yesterday, you have sometimes intentional acts. You have some people who intentionally want to abuse, to aggress, and to harm you intentionally. But you may have accidents. So accidents are unintentional. It's bad, but it's it's an accident. A medical error, it's an accident. A car accident, when you fall down, when you slip, all these are accidents. And you may have a natural disaster. You may have climatic, biological, you may have weather conditions and all this. So this is less than intentional. This is nature. But it can be very traumatic for the people. If you take in the west coast of Canada and the United States, last year we had forest fires, and they were long in time. They were during weeks and weeks. So the people who were living there, they had all the smoke. They have to go away, to leave their house behind them. This was very traumatic for them. They lost everything. Some cities were burned totally. So this is natural disaster. One other important thing is that one event may trigger the remembering of a past traumatic event. So if you are in a bus or in the metro and you are aggressed, and if this happened 3 years ago, it will trigger that. So we have to understand that the emotion connected to the past trauma will be felt with the present traumatic event. So you do have an addition of all the previous event, the emotion connected with the previous event to this one. So sometimes you have somebody who react heavily to a simple event. And it's just because this simple event, it can be a threat, it can be a word, it can be just a reaction of somebody. But for this person, this trigger the remembering of something else that went in the past. And then you observe a huge reaction which you don't understand. It's not understandable with this external reality, but it comes understandable with the internal perceptual reality, you see? So we have to consider that other variable. You have something that happened, and that something trigger all the souvenirs, remembrance of other situations in the past. That's it. This leads to a concept which is very important in clinical psychology and in the treatment we can give to people. We call that emotional transference. The transference is the definition of it, and I will read it because it's a little bit complex. The fact of taking an emotion associated to an event or a person in the past or in the present, so you have the emotion connected to that, and unconsciously, you're not aware of that, unconsciously you associate that emotion to the present situation and the present person in the present situation. So you are transposing emotion from a person, a situation, to another person, to another situation. We call that transference, emotional transference. This process is there minute after minute in our daily life. It's always there. We always connect emotions, transpose, transfer. We do that all the time. Yourself, when I look at you, you remember somebody else, and this person remember me somebody else. So it must be the same thing with me. So it's like that all the time. A therapist must understand that process. If he doesn't understand that process, he will not understand the emotions and the reactions of the person he is working with. Okay, I stop just a second and I'm coming back. Just a second.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, now the psychotrauma itself. The psychotrauma is the immediate emotional response following the traumatic event. So you have the event and then you have the response. This is called psychotrauma in itself. It is intense, uncontrolled, extreme, or moderate helplessness. It's the first sudden reaction. And to understand it, I summarize in few words, it is too much of sensorial or emotional excitation or stimulation. And these are technical terms because when we have our how can I call that? We see, we hear the senses. We have 5 senses. So these senses, they receive stimulation and excitation. So the connotation of this word is very narrow. It's just about our senses. So too much of sensorial, emotional excitation, stimulation, and too suddenly for the assimilation, absorption, individual's capacity. So it's too much at the same time. It can be negative, and you know what? It can also be positive. You have a good news and it's too much. It's something that you did not expect, let's say, to receive, and you many emotions because you cannot assimilate that. You understand? So we go to page 3. So this is a normal reaction, and we can compare that to an overflow, a backwash or an overflow. And then we have to make differences between 2, 3 different psychotrauma. You can have a simple psychotrauma. It is caused by a simple traumatic event, but you may have complex psychotrauma. They are caused by repeating traumatic events. For example, imprisonment, hostage holdings, and it's like one event that repeats itself and repeats itself. So this becomes complex psychotrauma, and you may have even more complex psychotrauma, and these are situations of abuse and aggression within the family or in the neighborhood. So some children will go through these kinds of traumatic events all during their childhood. So these are very, very complex psychotraumas. Now we have another distinction. The psychotrauma, which is the reaction, it may be direct. So the victim can be the subject who underwent the traumatic event. So the victim, the person who has the psychotrauma is the direct victim. And the victim can be, unfortunately, be the author of the traumatic event. If you drive a car and you have a car accident and you kill somebody, you are a victim of yourself, but you are in a trauma. Worse than that. And now I will refer to the war in Ukraine. Worse than that, you may have soldiers and their general, they force them to kill people. They did not want to kill people. They had the obligation to do that. And when the war is finished, they are traumatized by guilt because they did that. So, you know, it's never just one phase of these situations. It's always very complex. So we have to understand, to help people, we have to understand that we may be a victim directly or indirectly, but we are the victim. But the psychotrauma can also be indirect. In, in this case, and this affects in Ukraine the professionals who work with people. They have to absorb all the traumatic emotions of the people, so they may become a victim themselves of indirect traumatic situations. So the professional have to have means to treat themselves at the same time they deliver services. Sometimes we forget to do that, but if we don't have ways to take care of ourselves as a professional, then we are in danger. So I would say that the work we are doing together, myself, I am outside Ukraine, outside this I would say sordid war. I am affected very indirectly by this, so I am in a good position to help all the people who work with survivors and victims. You see, it's a kind of I would say indirect implication. So my emotions are not affected. If I was myself a victim of the war and that I have been one, I don't know if I would be able to cure other people because I would have to cure myself first. So me in this work I'm doing with you, I am the one who is not affected, so I am available emotionally to work with the people, you see. Okay, so we go to let me see. Oh yes, on page 4. Sometimes some people will not react to a traumatic event. They will not react at all. And sometimes they will have the feeling to have survived to something, and this is like a miracle, and this is magic, and they will feel empowered with that. But there is a danger. It's like they have been wounded, but they don't know it, they don't feel it. The problem is that when this great feeling will go down in the days and the weeks and months that will follow, they will feel all the overflow they were able to dissociate with. So this is something that we have to take care of, in what I call lack of reaction following a traumatic event. We have to be always very prudent with people who don't react. People who will tell you, it's okay with me, I can cope with this, I can adapt, you know, I am strong. And the answer must be, yes, you are strong now, but you may check, you may check. Sometimes some people will go to see the doctor, and the doctor will diagnose something, and they will say, for me, it's not a problem. I get used to have that, and it's okay. And the doctor will say, if this is not treated, you're in danger. You are in danger. So sometimes we're not aware, and we have to. So your professionals who work with people who says everything's fine with me, we have to be prudent all the time. I'm not saying, and I'm not saying that people don't have um, coping mechanism. This exists. Some people are very good in coping mechanism, but sometimes it's just in appearance, and it's not deep installed, this coping mechanism. Professional this must be aware of that possibility. And another thing too is the memory we have of a traumatic event. We have to understand that memory change the event all the time, all the time, all the time. If you do a very simple exercise, you describe to a friend an evening you participate to with other friends. You say that the day after, 2 days after, 3 days after, and you will see your story will change. It will change with time. And then 1 week after, 2 weeks after, it will be a different story. So for traumas, when there is a lot of emotion, the change is more than major, because we have to adapt, and we try unconsciously to put aside, and we don't know that we do that mechanically. We put aside which is difficult, and we keep which is easier to remember. So we change the story. It's like you're reading a novel, and then you take scissors and you cut some pages you don't like. So our memory works like that. Okay, now we present the traumatic event. Second, we present the post-trauma, the the psychotrauma, and now we will enter in the post-traumatic stress disorder. So would you have any question now
Well,
on these two parts?
it's the way you describe it, I automatically put it into our perspective in terms of the war, because the war had started in 2014, not for everyone. So
Yes.
I was indirectly hurt in 2014.
Yes.
Now I'm still like, I'm reliving that indirect trauma, but on a much bigger scale, whereas people who were directly traumatized in 2014,
Yes.
now they sort of indirectly traumatized, you know. So it's a very delicate yet self-beneficial, if I may, because Julie, remember the writer, the one who wrote the poems?
Yeah.
Her direct trauma and her direct losses in a family took place in 2014. And she is, for me now, she is my strength, if I may. Because I am now living in still indirect trauma, but it's much more feasible now, much more visible, because we already have some losses within our family, but not human losses, not the beating hearts, you know. It's just financial and whatever material. But within her experience and when it happened with her, she somehow managed on her own, maybe due to her willpower, but she managed to accumulate enough of resources from 2014, and now we're in 2022, where me and people like myself, we sort of now only experiencing more and more and more trauma that we can see, that we can visually pursue, you know, perceive, sorry. So this is very interesting, because Ukrainian war, every war is unique, but Ukrainian war, in terms of time frame, geography, cultural, say, complications, as in any culture, as in any big country, like we are massive countries, so every big country with a lot of population would inevitably have, you know, questions and identity crises, and just even regardless to the fact that we are only 30 years of age, 31 as a country. So thank you. It's put everything you just saying, putting our situation, our case with the Ukrainian war in much detailed and in much more approachable way.
Okay, good. Okay. So we will go to the post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's at the bottom of page 4. When the psychotrauma is impossible to assimilate, and I always use the word digest. It's like digestion. It's exactly the same thing. Digestion is something physical, but assimilation is something emotional. When it is impossible to assimilate, is the consequences of psychotrauma result in a post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a diagnosis here in America well defined in the manuals of psychiatry. So I will present what is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. I will explain that. So the first thing is that it is an abnormal or psychopathologic reaction. It is a reaction which is not adapt to the reality. In psychiatry, the diagnosis of PTSD is based on the following criteria, and you have a lot of criteria. It is something somewhat complex, so I will present these criteria. First, the person has been exposed to an event in which the following factors, these factors were present. So one or many individuals may have died, including the subject. It was possible for the subject to die, or have been severely injured, threatened to die, or have the physical integrity threatened. So it is something that is major. The strict definition of PTSD is life is in danger. Now, I will I will say something which is, how can I say that, a subtlety. We often talk of PTSD in cases in which there were no danger for life. But we understand that these cases are very severe, but you do have less severe cases following which we develop a PTSD. So, but these, you know, we are not theoreticians here, but I just want to make nuances between severe cases and less severe cases. So 1.2, the subject reaction has been an intense fear, a feeling of helplessness and or horror. Sometimes it's horrible to see something. Some people who are wound with the blood, the corpse, it's impossible to assimilate these images. Few years ago, here in Canada, we have a criminal who killed somebody and cut his body in pieces, and he recorded that and put that on the internet. The police was able to stop this video on the internet, but it took few days to be able to remove that. But then you have a lot of people who saw that these images of somebody cutting somebody else. It was horrific. And I'm sure that many people who saw that, their life has changed from that moment. And you know how kids are. They try to impress one another. So many kids and teens, they saw that video. It was terrible. So the second criteria, the traumatic event is constantly lived in many ways. And these three items are very important. Repetitive and invading memories and dreams of the event, provoking a feeling of this stays, these images, they stay in your mind, and they are always there, like an ongoing, how can I say that? Ongoing story, yeah. You can't help, it's imposing to you. And you can have pieces of that in your dreams during night when you sleep. Because you can dream during the day and you can during the night. So we make a distinction. During the day, it's one moment of being somewhere else, but we are dreaming. But when we sleep at night, we dream all the time. Some people think don't dream, but if we look at somebody who is sleeping, we see the eyes, they are moving, just the eyebrow, they are moving a little bit. We call that REM, R-E-M, rapid eyes movement. And when we see that, the person is dreaming. So but few people remember their dreams, but everybody dreams. And I would say during night and during days. People who went through a trauma and develop a PTSD, their day and night dreams is always about pieces of the psychotrauma of the event. And why we may ask, oh, we may ask why these people are trying all the time and all the time and all the time. It's because they try to assimilate. This is why they repeat the story, they repeat the story. And this is why yesterday, this morning when we had our webinar, I told to Julia, keep asking to retell the story. Yeah, again and again and again, to facilitate the assimilation of the traumatic event. If we don't do that, your brain is trying to do it itself, and you are unable to do more than just think and think and think and think. When you tell the story, then you evacuate something, and you evacuate the emotion that goes with it. So in that way, we cure in that way. So the first sub-criteria is repetitive and invading memories. The second is sudden impressions or reactions, as if the event would repeat itself now. So we have the feeling that this will happen again, just right away, including dissociation reactions, flashback. Suddenly you have these images of what happened, and you don't see anything else than this image, and you are again in a state of shock. And this is the second element. The third one is intense psychological distress at exposure to cues that recall the event. So everything possible that will recall this, what happened, will provoke distress intensely. So the second criteria, the traumatic event is constantly lived again in these three ways. And the first one, people will tell you, I can't help it. This is in my mind all the time, all the time, all the time. Just that gives you a cue that we have PTSD. The third criteria now, the third criteria, the person persistently avoids the stimuli associated to psychotrauma. So we try to avoid the thoughts, the emotion, conversations, activities, places. You know, some people can be aggressive in the metro, let's say, and they don't want to take anymore the metro. They don't want to take public transport. Second, persistent and exaggerated negative beliefs or expectations about oneself, others, or the word. So we develop non-adapt expectations and belief. We start to have what I call distortion of the reality, distortion of perception of reality. Third, the incapacity, impossibility to remember important aspects of the psychotrauma. Then your memory gets disorganized and you lose. This is, and the people would say, I don't remember what happened. I don't remember what I did after, what I did before, what this other did, I remember. For important decreasing of interest in activities, we are losing our interest. We are not interested anymore. It's understandable because all of our energy goes, it's like efforts to master the emotion. So we are busy doing that. So we don't have energy, other energy to be interested in social activities. we are too much busy to trying again and again and again to assimilate and to get rid of these images and events. So decreasing of interest. And in the same way, feelings of detachment and estrangement from the others. We get disconnected to the people. We're not connected anymore because we have this major task to do is to get rid of the overflow. And with that, it's impossible to experience any positive emotion. We feel bad all the time. And the second, the feeling of a dead end, of being unable to go to normal life cycles. So this is the third criteria. And then we have a fourth criteria, which is persistent symptoms. So we have sleep disorders, irritable behaviors, outbursts. We have problems of concentration. We can't concentrate our mind on a problem and activity. We are arrogant and we may have exaggerated startle response. For just a little thing, we react. So on page 6, I summarize all these 7 points. And these 7 points must be, I would say, remembered for the healthcare workers. So a PTSD is a mental repetition of the traumatic event. It is an emotional and physical desensitization, disconnection. It is a collapse of stimuli reaction threshold. Our threshold goes down, down, low, low, low. We react to everything. And emotional disorganization and breakdown. We are not efficient anymore. A loss of functional capacities. We're not functional anymore. We are disorganized. A loss of memory linked to the traumatic event. And finally, as a result, a loss of proudness and self-esteem. This is PTSD. And next time, the next point, the development, what happened if this is not treated, what happened, and the complications, and with that, the screening, what the screening on page 9 and 10. So that could be a second record, and then a third record could be the psychological interventions.
Exactly.